So there's been a lot of conversation about coming up with some more specific practices to help us along the lines of finding ourselves in this path of awakening. Seems like it would be a good idea to cover some 6 basic aspects of our truest nature and put them in separate videos so that they're a lot easier to reference. We could say that this is 6 ways to make sure that we're deeply on the path and that we're heading toward awakening, or at least our truest nature. The one thing that can be said is that when we reach a place of pure authenticity, a paradox seems to occur where, upon becoming 100% our truest selves, we begin to lose any sense of self at all. And so for the first video in the 6-part series, we're going to cover the concept of being honest, or the nature of creative expression. So to look at our truest nature, a nice metaphor to kind of illustrate this is just imagine that there was a beam of pure white light that comes and hits a prism here. And then as that white light bends through the prism, it sprays out the cornucopia of colors there. Our truest nature is this white light, and it is also all of these colors, these different shades. And one aspect of that is our ability to express ourselves creatively, honestly, without hesitation. It's pretty useful to see where we hesitate when it comes to honesty. And one of the first places that can become evident is out here externally when it comes to certain circumstances and we are confronted with a decision or some form of honesty. Where does the hesitation take place? Is there a no? That is an aspect of what is inhibiting our truest nature, what seems to be getting in the way of our creative expression. Creative expression definitely has a lot of different angles to it. It can be how we practice art, it can be how we show ourselves in a lot of ways. Ultimately, though, it is just the part of us that knows some truth that for some reason is being interfered with by thought. So, being honest, how deep can we go? How absolutely unadulterated can we allow our honesty? Because the honesty that seems to show up out here will always be a reflection of the honesty that we are somehow negotiating with in here. To have a voice. Or for those of you who are connected to chakras, it is the throat chakra. The ability to express truth. The ability to recognize what is honest without a second thought, without hesitation, without analysis or definition. And so, along the lines of being honest, we allow ourselves to speak in a way that is uninhibited. And as I've mentioned before, at first it can come across sideways sometimes. It can be a little bit blunt. That's just part of the process. Don't get confused. Honesty and being blunt, being mean, being rude isn't necessarily the same thing. In fact, on a very low level, it's still being co-opted in that way. Honesty is the allowance of our truest nature, our most honest expression, to arise in a creative, magnificent way. The more honest we become, in a general sense, the more likely our ability to express becomes more creative. It becomes more interesting. It becomes softer in a lot of ways. Because it's really not about criticism. It's not about judgment. Honesty is just about what we know to be true, what we can feel all the time. And for the first part of this series of videos, we can start to ask a little inquiry to get closer to what honesty is. Is my truth negotiable? Is what I know and feel to be true, is that allowed to change for any reason? And by no means am I saying that we enter into a place of non-compromising. And instead, honesty seems to show up in a way that is more likely to compromise, more likely to create situations externally that are win-win and not oriented toward I win, you lose, or self-sacrificial, I lose and you win. Honesty is about every single word we say. That impeccability with honesty should have no compromise. Be as honest as we possibly can be. And you'll begin to see that the more honest we are out here in the content area, the everyday doings of life, we become more in contact with the honesty within ourselves. This path toward authenticity, it doesn't really have any negotiation. It doesn't really have any apology. Somehow we know the truth. And it's not really a matter of the superficialities of events or things along those lines. It's more along the lines of, what am I willing to sacrifice for the benefit of this illusion? What am I willing to give up on behalf of someone else to prevent conflict? This shows up quite a bit for people. Honesty and complete creative expression here, a lot of people will avoid conflict by agreeing to something that they really don't want to agree to. And that eventually leads to a place of a lot of thought pressure. Triggers for most people begin much earlier than the mind will allow you to remember. And sometimes what happens is a small conflict will arise. There will be a sense of honesty that tends to come up, and instead of letting it be expressed, we gloss it over. We say we can handle it, and somehow that hesitation and that sensational or even emotional stuffing leads to something a lot more complicated. It leads to a sense of internal pressure. And when pointing toward internal pressure, it tends to be aligned quite closely to thought. Thoughts begin to increase. Anxieties begin to increase. And then down the road, maybe something else comes up. Honesty definitely wants to be expressed, but to avoid the conflict, we do it again. The pressure increases. The thoughts increase. A sense of valuing of ourselves might also show up too, where there's a very subtle self-judgment. And then a more intense event happens, and the same thing. Instead of expressing our honesty in a non-reactive way, we stuff and create more thought pressure, more sensational displacement, and we begin to feel an internal pressure building. And then finally, an event, maybe not even a big event, happens, and all of that thought pressure, all of that sensational pressure seems to come out in a trigger. And we have ourselves predicament where it's anger or whatever the reaction is, and we find ourselves feeling completely out of control and disconnected from our bodies, from the words that are coming out of our mouths. And then maybe honesty does come out, but it definitely comes out in a non-creative, aggressive, hostile, and emotionally explosive way. It doesn't always show up externally with people. Yet, we do know where our honesty is. How willing are you to enter into a phase of life where there is no more compromising with what wants to be expressed, with what pure honesty truly is? And you can experiment in small ways. But when it comes to conflict with other people, it can be a really wonderful mirror to let us know what we don't want to look at for ourselves. Sometimes our honesty and our truest nature comes in directly in conflict with this identified egoic personality, and there is a resistance there. experiment a little. In what places of your life are you refusing to be completely honest? Where do you hide your truth? And I think as you come closer to that, you'll begin to see that there really is no apology for our truest nature. There is no compromise. This is non-negotiable. Practice some honesty for a while, and allow that to show up in a way that your communication becomes clearer and clearer. And you'll begin to see that the way that you communicate is a demonstration of the way that thoughts form in the mind. And having that kind of awareness is really irreplaceable. So, dedicate yourself to being honest, with no reservation, with no hesitation. Be honest, and be honest all the time.